Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated podcast where we take animation seriously. We talk everything animation here, including Fruits Baskets, which we'll be getting into right now. I'm April Collins, and today I'm joined by Michelle Anderer.
Hello.
And Alex Bonilla.
Hey.
Today we will be discussing episode 17 of Fruits Baskets. This is for Uo-chan. Warning, spoilers for everything up until this point. Some of us have seen the early 2000s anime. Some of us have read the manga. We're not going to be talking about any of that here. We're just going to be talking about everything up until this episode. You can, of course, find out more about this podcast on overlyanimated.com. And also, feel free to subscribe to us on iTunes at overlyanimated.com/iTunes or on YouTube at youtube.com/overlyanimated. We're also on Spotify now, so check us out there. Just search Overly Animated. It's super easy, promise. So, let's get into this. Michelle, what are your thoughts on this episode?
I thought this was a really good back half to the first episode we got last week. I definitely teared up a lot towards the end when Kyoko had Uo-chan on her back and she was carrying her home. I guess I had assumed that maybe Uo-chan's relationship with Kyoko would be like the main focus, but it was pretty much 50-50. Like her relationship with Toru seemed as important as her relationship with Kyoko, and I actually kind of like that a lot because they give her different but similar things in her life that she's been missing up to this point. So I'm just really happy she's doing good now, and I do love that the younger gangster girls were like totally swept away by her at the end because she's like their Kyoko, and I love that it's just like a new generation of fangirls at this point. But this was a really good episode. I really liked it a lot. It gave me so many feels.
Aw, feels. Alex, how did you feel about this episode?
Same. I thought that this was a very moving episode. It was seeing a character as hardened as Uotani has been throughout this series to like see her broken down to her like rock bottom, as she says in the middle of this, like seeing her in tears, and then seeing her relationship with Toru and with Toru's mom develop over the course of this episode. It definitely gets you moved in the heart, and like just like the story of struggling to leave a life that you no longer want to be a part of, and like the consequences of making that decision like that. That's all transmitted pretty well in this as well. I find it interesting that like my top tier of episodes would probably be this one, the Spring Comes, which was a flashback episode with a side character, and also the Momiji episode, which was a flashback. So I find it interesting that this series, like its most emotional moments for me have been when we explore these other characters in the universe and their tragic backstories. Well, maybe because they're all tragic, but like I think that this is like another example of them doing really well in like in fleshing out characters that you've always seen in the background, but like you finally focus on them and you are able to tell very interesting stories about how they got to where they are today. So I think that Uotani is amazing, and her episode is great.
Oh, yay! I love it. So I'm also high on this episode, but and I'm just going to leave it at that. But I'm going to use my time to read you Beatrice's thoughts. So
Ooh.
She did send them in because she's not here today. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to encapsulate the energy that is in this email.
Good job. Okay.
Beatrice says, Arisa! She deserves the world, and the Somas better not take Toru away from her. I loved everything about their story. Still think it should have been an entire series in and of itself. I also love that newly turned fangirls, cause same, I am one. Great conclusion to this trip down memory lane, but that means I have no idea where we're going next. Scared and excited for what's to come. My biggest worry is that after this Arisa-heavy episode, we won't be getting one ever again. I don't want her character to be checked off the Fruits Basket's list of characters to explore. I know we have a bunch to cover, but she is definitely one of my favorites. I don't want her to disappear into the background, especially after we got so much depth to her character. These last 2 episodes together are Fruits Baskets at its strongest. But will the momentum and quality continue? That we will see. So
those are good points. I mean, I agree too. I don't want Uo-chan to disappear in the background. We still haven't got Hana-chan's whole situation, but I mean, I'm sure Uo-chan's going to show up in that story too, because she joined their little tri group later. She was the last one to join both her and Toru. So, I mean, yeah, she is a really interesting character, and this chunk of episodes really proved that. So, I mean, I hope, I know the boys are going to be, the majority of the show, probably, but they should take some time every, 10 episodes to be oh, let's go back to these 2 ladies and see what's going on with them.
Let's see the ladies again.
I will say that, this episode works. Obviously, I would like to see more of Uo-chan, but I think that this episode works really well as a climax for her, because throughout the series so far, her main thing has been that she's very protective of Toru. She loves her a lot. Along with Hanajima, they both really love her a lot, and that's kind of been her main thing, being tough, but also around Toru she's soft, and this is kind of the culmination of seeing how she's acted up to now, how she got that way, and this episode does a really good job of seeing how she warms up to Toru and why she now feels that sense of wanting to be protective around her because she had such a close relationship to her mother. So again, I would love to see more of her, but I definitely think that this episode is done in a way where it feels almost like a culmination of her character based on what we've seen of her so far.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you, Alex, because as nice as it would be to see more of Uo-chan, I just don't think that we're gonna get it. But I definitely think that these episodes just perfectly work as that climax that you mentioned, specifically because we get her entire backstory, and I'm glad that we didn't try and shove it into one episode, that it's spread out through 2 episodes, and then we even have those sort of breaks between where we're in the present, and so it's it does a really good job at tying in the present with the past kind of thing. So I really like that. And I think that, this is, a great example of, perfectly used flashbacks. Because sometimes with, shows, flashbacks get kind of, daunting. And so I think this is, I agree that this episode is extremely strong and probably one of the best episodes for sure, just because, it's so perfectly executed. Mm-hmm. So
I'd agree with that.
But anyway, continuing on. So, I guess, do you guys think that we'll get something similar with Hanajima? Because they do mention within the episode, at what point Hanajima kind of comes into their friend group. So, Alex, do you think we'll get something similar with Hanajima? Do you think it's warranted? What are your thoughts on that?
I definitely think we're going to get some Hanajima backstory in the future. This episode briefly touches on it, where it's hey, we got to 8th grade, we met Hanajima, and she was cool, so we hung out with her. But I think that there's a lot more to be dug into, and I think that Hanajima has a bit more variety of traits to her than Uo-chan thus far. So I think there's definitely potential to build into how she's gotten to where she is today, how she developed her wave abilities. I don't know, but yeah. So given how well they did with Uo, and again, at the end of the day, this show is about Toru and the two boys, but Toru is the main character. So it makes sense that we'd spend some time getting to her friends eventually. We got Uo-chan out. Now I think that we do need to get Hana in there if we've done Uo.
Agreed. Michelle, what do you think? Do you think we'll get something similar with Hanajima? Do you want it? Do you need it? Tell me your feelings.
I don't need it right away, but I think there's no doubt that we'll get it. I do think her situation is probably a very different dynamic, so I can't see it coming back in the show until it's more relevant to the plot. And we'll say, Uo-chan's episodes kind of come out of nowhere. It's just like, Yuki's like, oh yes, you are all friends. How did that happen? Please tell us. It's not, I mean, it's kind of random, and it's the kind of thing you can put anywhere. I think it makes the sense of it coming after the funeral episode is good, because then it's in your mind like, oh yeah, like, Uo-chan got this awesome gangster coat from Kyoko. Why would she leave it to her? What does that mean? So it plays in really nicely to this episode as a setup. But, like, honestly, we could have waited, like, 10 more episodes and gotten this. I think maybe it's going to be, like, a similar situation for Hana-san, because, I mean, I don't know. I just can't see it, like, coming out without it having a reason. And, like, so she has a big family. She has her wave thing going on. Everyone's afraid of her. I can see, like, that being a thing, whereas, like, maybe she didn't have any friends until Toru, and O-chan. So, yeah, I wonder. I think it's going to have to play into the plot, though. I feel like there's going to have to be a reason that she would bring it up, and I can't see that reason happening right now. So it might be a bit, but I'd say probably... Well, actually, I'm not sure how long these seasons are. I want to say, like, before the end of season 1 we would find out, but if the seasons are, like, 24 episodes, it's not, like, that far away, so who actually knows? But I feel like we aren't going to have to wait, like, too long. Like, maybe in the next 10 episodes, we'll get it.
10 episodes. I'm going to write down your prediction.
Okay, alright, we can revisit it in 10 episodes.
10 episodes. We'll get Hanajima's backstory. Yeah, I think that it's interesting, though, because, it was mentioned that, like, Hanajima has all of these, like, different characteristics already. Like, she has the whole wave thing. And so I'm, I would love a Hanajima episode. I think that would be incredible, because she is best girl. But I have a feel, like, there's part of me that, like, deep down inside feels like she's gonna get snubbed on her own, like, individual episode. Which, again, is, like, why I bring up the question, because, like, they just so casually are just like, oh yeah, and this is when we became friends with Hanajima, and, like, that was it, kind of thing. So, I'm really hoping that, like, she doesn't get snubbed, she gets her own type of episode. If we do get it, I don't feel like it's going to be, like, as deep as this one. But I think, like, I agree with you, Michelle, that it'll probably be something like, this is how, like, maybe she didn't have friends and, like, Toru was her first friend or something like that. Or, like, I can even see it being, like, kind of like a combination sort of thing where, like, she transfers to the school, she doesn't make friends right away, maybe someone, like, picks on her, and then Uo-chan's like, hey, don't do that, like... kind of situation. Just, like, kind of like her doing, like, a little bit more, or, like, doing, like, what Kyoko did to her, like, kind of standing up for her and, like, just accepting her into her life. So, I think that would be a good episode, but...
Yeah. I mean, part of me wonders, just because, like, Hanajima's character is so often, like, a comic relief thing, and that's why I think she's so much more prevalent as a character that sticks out in our minds than Uo-chan is. But, I mean, for some reason that makes me think, like, her backstory might be, like, really serious, too. Because, like, honestly, everyone's backstory is, like, pretty serious. Like, nobody has a funny backstory. They're all, like, shrouded in sadness and misery. So, part of me is just, like, expecting it to be, for there to be something kind of, like, intense going on there with Hanajima, too. But we'll see. Maybe it'll be different. Maybe it'll surprise us all.
Momiji is, like, the comic reliefiest character ever.
Yeah,
like,
and look at his backstory. Yeah, so, like, I don't know. I wonder about it.
Yeah.
You can't be a character.
I just want to... I wanted to comment on, like, April's description of, like, what a potential Hana episode would be. And it's, like, it has to, like, blend in her becoming friends with Toru with another problem that she's dealing with in her life. And I think that that's what makes this episode that we just watched very compelling, because it's not just focusing on Uo-chan becoming friends with Toru, but also, like, how that ties into her, like, struggle with, like, where she is in her life and, like, her goals for the future. Like, what does she want to accomplish to achieve happiness? And like, it's also tying in relationship with her former role model. So it's like, it's doing a lot of stuff in one episode, while at the same time explaining the basic thing of how they became friends, but like it's tying it in with a lot of other stuff going on. So I definitely think that if we get a Hanajima episode, it will have to do a similar thing where it's not just how they became friends, but also like how that connects to whatever was going on with Hana's life before this.
That's true. See, and like you bringing that up makes me even more worried that we're not going to get the Hanajima episode because I know, like, I hate to admit it, but I just like I feel that way because like okay, like Uo-chan makes sense because she comes from like such a tragic like backstory, you know, just as much as like Toru has. And it's again like this continuing message of the show is like rising from like whatever terribleness is in your life kind of thing. And so, but like we knew that Arisa used to be in a gang, and so like that's not a good life, obviously. But like we don't have anything to like base it off of with Hanajima. Like we just know that like she's really good friends with Toru. They met in like middle school, and that.
I mean, we know everyone else is afraid of her, and we know she comes from a big family. I think one thing that happens when you have a lot of siblings is it's harder to stand out. So maybe you try more, like maybe extra, and maybe
that's where her wave thing comes from.
Yeah, like maybe honestly, there's like some family dynamic stuff going there with other siblings and wanting to feel noticed for who you are. I think there's definitely enough, and like we didn't know that much about Uo-chan honestly before her episode. So I feel like the few things we know about Hana are enough to like they could do like a lot, and I feel like I would buy it and it would feel believable.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I could buy into it. Just because, like, I would love to have a Hanajima episode.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Us too. You gotta do another two-parter, guys. It's only fair.
Yeah, it's only fair. It's literally just like a day in the life of Hanajima. It's not anything.
I mean, that would be great
God,
too.
Like,
I don't need tragic backstory. I just need to see what she does with her life.
Right?
Exactly.
Like, what happens when she goes home? Like... No, I think that would be a really good episode. But I guess sort of like bringing up like the whole like family thing too. So how I guess because Uo-chan kind of comes to a lot of conclusions in this episode, so there's a lot of like morals to the story, which I think is wonderful. And I know one of the things was like. Did you feel like satisfied with like finally getting the sort of the answer to like why Uo-chan had such a big problem with Kyoko? And that was simply because like Kyoko just like went out and had a normal life. Alex, how did that whole like coming to that realization kind of settle with you?
Well, it made sense because like combined with the previous episode where like she's kind of disgusted at like the mushiness between Toru and Kyoko, and so like when it comes to this, and she has the line of course it's uncomfortable here because I've never experienced an atmosphere like this, so it's just something so foreign to her that she doesn't know how to react to it, and like that feels very very believable that even something that is interpreted as good to the eyes of the world, like if you've never experienced it yourself before, you're kind of confused like how to react to something like that. So and she is like in a state of distress, so as she's like saying that, she's like sitting on the floor crying. So like the way that she's reacting felt very relatable and very understandable given where she is, and that's also what makes it feel so great when like Toru sleeps on her shoulder and then Kyoko comes in, like sees them together. It's like they can tell that she's in a very bad place right now. She's like trying to figure out where, or like get her bearings on like where she is in her life. So I definitely think that first scene where like she shows up at the house again, it already begins very strong there.
Yeah. Even though Toru brought her to the house.
Yeah.
I was like, because the first time that she goes back to the house isn't necessarily like of her own free will. Like Toru just brings her there. So, but no, I think that's like I guess she accepted like going back. She didn't like fight it or anything like that. So I guess that's a good point. Go ahead.
Sorry, I like that the manga / anime did this as like a plot reason, because by the end of the first episode of this arc, it would not have made sense for Uo-chan to go back by her own free will. She's like, oh yeah, I feel fine now. Let's give this another shot. She would not have done that. So I like that it became a situation where she was running away from a gang, and she had to go somewhere to find shelter to be safe, and Toru gave her that option, and so it was really like a self-preservation thing versus a just like, oh yeah, I feel fine coming back here, like under normal circumstances. It had to be a pretty unnormal circumstance to get her to go back there, which I think is the most logical, plausible thing at this point in her story, so I like that as a reason they chose.
Yeah, I agree that I agree with that. So, but
by the way, that the open before like we get to the intro, like just them beating her under the train, like you don't see any like blood or anything, but like it still feels very brutal, like that way to just like enter into this episode with just seeing Uo-chan getting thrown around, and so again that primes you for like her being very open to Toru taking her away in that moment.
yeah, I think it's also really interesting how this show has handled, or at least like within this episode and the last episode, how they've handled violence.
Yeah.
Like, just because like we've gotten like violence previously with Akito and like the whole eye situation. But like, it's interesting how like in these episodes, like there's violence, but you don't directly see it almost all of the time. Like there's no blood. But it's very, like, it's still, I feel like this violence hurts more than, like, the previous violence. I don't know.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think actually, I remember I was saying, like, how much I love the girl gang in the first episode. And now I, like, really want to take that back because it got, like, a lot scarier this time. And I think it's because, like, in the first opening shot, it's not just that they're beating her up and that she can, like, you know, quote unquote, hold her own for a hot second with 3 of them. But they also say, like, let's get the others and make, like, a show of this. And there's the implication, like, if there's even more people, there's no way she's going to get out of this okay. Like, she's really going to get hurt. And it might even be, like, life-threatening. So I think when she runs into Toru, it really is like imperative that they not find her, because if more of those girls find her, like that's it. And that's kind of really terrifying. So, and I also just like, I appreciate that Toru was able to kind of like collect herself in the moment, just be like, all right, bye Tofu, like see you later. This is more important. And just like take the initiative to keep Uo-chan safe. Because, like, in that moment, I kind of read it as, like, Toru, like, knows about her mom. She knows she was in a gang. So I feel like, in some weird way, she's, like, kind of able to handle this situation, too, in a way that a normal person maybe couldn't. And I think that's kind of really interesting, also.
I think that's interesting, too, because I remember when I first watched the episode, I initially was like, I was, like, shocked because I was like, Toru's done this before. She knows exactly what to do. Like,
yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, shit, did this, like, happen with her mom ever? Like, how does she know just what to do?
Right. And then, like, it even, like, gets solidified more whenever, like, they're in the apartment and she like, gets the first aid kit and she, like, is like, oh, I'm gonna take care of you. And I'm like, how many times have you done this, Toru? Like, can you not?
She's a pro now. Oh my god.
And they're, like, labeled. Like, some of them are Toru's, some of them are her mom's. Like...
I thought it was very adorable, even though, like, Uo-chan was disgusted with it. She was like, this is gross.
I was like, she really loves you. Yeah.
Gross. Your mom loves you.
It's on the bandages. She writes on all of them.
I know. And the cute little note that says, get well soon, or whatever. That was great. I really enjoyed that moment. So... Michelle, you brought up the girl gang. And,
yeah.
And I am, like, I think it's really interesting that in the first episode, we were like, yeah, girl gangs, like, this is great. And then, like, you were like, oh no, like, I take that back.
Well, I guess this is like the dark side of the girl gang. Like some parts of a girl gang are like really fun and exciting, but then the other side is just like, oh yeah, it's a gang still, and they'll beat you up if you ever try to leave. And
that is how gang recruitment works in the show.
Yeah, it's very accurate.
Is that how recruitment and like leaving works?
Well, that makes sense though, right? Because like the reason they were mad at her is when they found like, oh, she's like going to school again, and then they say like, oh, well, that's not cool. Like somebody come get her. Because I think the implication is like they're all in this kind of negative, lost space in life, and the idea that some of them would leave to like quote unquote better their lives feels like a huge, like they're blowing them off. It feels like super a smack in the face to what they're doing with their time. So they have to punish that versus like question it, right? So that makes total sense, but again, like it's like, man, that makes it incredibly hard to ever leave, and that's super scary.
Yeah, I was actually very upset with all of the girl gang stuff.
Yeah.
Because I was like, this does not... Because, like, in the first episode, they sort of painted in, like, a really nice light. Not, like, a really nice light. Like, obviously it's a
badass light, though,
yeah,
right?
like, you've got all of these, like, ladies, and, like, you're all there together, and you're supportive. But then, like... Yeah, but then you get to this episode, and, like, that's not the case. And I thought that, like... it sent, like, a really good message, kind of, because even though you may feel like you're in a supportive environment, that you're not. But I was still, like, really upset, especially when they're like, I can't believe she's going to school. And I'm like, what? Let her go to school! Like,
yeah, only that one girl, the dark-haired woman with the mole on her face, which Kyoko, like, says, like, she had a mole on her face. I don't know why that's important. Maybe she's coming back later. I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't. She might come back later in the story.
She gets named, too.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like,
at the end.
She seems like a character who's gonna reoccur. But again, she's the only one who was, like, feeling bad about any of this. And I don't know, April, you brought up a thing. Oh God, now I can't remember what. Oh no, the thing about how like there's this idea that like a gang could be really fun and supportive, but then what if it's not? And I feel like that's kind of what Kyoko was even saying, like when she's carrying Ochan back with her, because she's like, you can't like really appreciate, you know, like gentleness until you feel pain. You can't appreciate light until you feel darkness. And I think the implication is basically like, if everything's terrible, this situation in a gang might seem really great to you, but if you have something better to compare it to, you're not going to necessarily want that life anymore. I think that's exactly what happened with Ochan. Like when she started hanging out with Toru and her mom, and they're really kind and patient and gave her a safe space to feel appreciated and not lonely anymore, she's like, you know, I could do this is better than what I have going on. I don't want to be in the gang anymore. This feels more right for me. So I think that was good on Kyoko's mom to like get it and be able to explain it to her in a way that makes sense.
Do you think that even because throughout like this arc, we haven't had like there's only really been like 2 interactions between Kyoko and Uo-chan that we've seen. Alex, do you think that these 2 interactions, so the first one was, of course, whenever, like, she first meets her, and then the second one is, of course, whenever Kyoko's carrying Uo-chan on her back. So, Alex, do you feel that, like, even though it was only these 2 episodes, or these 2 moments, that they did a really good job at conveying, like, the meaning, like, how meaningful, like, that relationship was to Uo-chan?
For sure. And also there's like the in-between part where she's like says that she always came to talk about her problems, which seem childish, but like you see them having tea together and like she's listening. So you can like definitely get the sense even before we get to the carrying her that like she's taking on this kind of mother figure role for Uo-chan. And so when we get to the point where she shows up to rescue her and we see them carrying each other and Uotani is like in tears, like as she's like trying to like she like feels disappointed in herself, and Kyoko's there to be supportive. Like that all feels very, very earned because Kyoko comes from a similar background. So like she understands, like she makes it very clear that she understands the struggle because that's something that she had to go through too, and like that kind of And the fact that Uotani up to this point has not had a support system within the gang, and so finally having one outside, like it's emotionally moving her because she'd never had someone that talks to her in this way before. So that all feels very, very moving. And that's why at the end, that's when she says, like, I loved Kyoko-san, like, you can feel it due to their interactions at that moment and how their paths crossed and the similarities that they had in their lives that put across through this episode.
I don't think I could have said it better. Goodness, lost my train of thought. So moved.
No worries.
This entire episode is moving.
Right? Like, okay, so I know that I cried multiple times. Michelle, did you cry multiple times? Okay.
I cried a
Alex,
lot.
Did you cry?
I teared up a little bit when she was getting carried because, like, I saw Uotani crying and I was like, oh man. So, like that was the closest I got.
Okay, I appreciate it. So
yay, communal crying.
Communal crying. Fruits baskets, where we all feel the pain together.
No, that's so the tagline of this show. It's true.
It really is.
We see someone rise from the ashes. It's great.
That's very true. Like, especially. But even though, I guess, like, no, never mind. I forgot what I was going to say about that. Just kidding.
It'll come back later.
It'll come back to me. Okay, so let's see. Is there anything else you guys want to kind of talk about before I throw some other questions at you? In terms of, like, Kyoko's message to Uo-chan and just sort of, like, that whole, like, growing from out of nothingness.
There's a line that I wrote down here where, like, while she's being carried, Kyoko says something like, there are feelings you don't understand until you get hurt, and some you understand only when you've hit rock bottom. And so, like, that kind of hit pretty hard because it's like it fits with the rest of the theme where it's like you need light with the darkness and all that. But there's something to the idea of that you don't appreciate the smaller things in life until, like, you've hit your lowest point, and that's where we've seen Uotani at in this episode. So it definitely hits pretty hard when she gives that line.
I agree. I think that, like, Kyoko's, like, whole, I guess she called it, like, her theory in life or whatever. I thought, like, just that whole moment was, like, amazing, and it was really hard to not just, like, copy down everything that she said word for word, because I was like, there's so many good things in here, like,
yeah.
So, I really enjoyed that. So, and even though, like, sometimes it can feel, like, sort of, like, cumbersome for a character to sort of, like, monologue in that way, I just thought it was, like, so beautiful. And really, like, I was crying the entire time, so if that sums up everything. Just because I think that everyone can relate to, like, feeling like they've been at their rock bottom before, and then, like, trying to come up from that, or even if, like, you haven't, like, come up from it, like, you're trying to, or it could, like, inspire you to want to try too. So I just think it's just beautiful. But, okay, so beautiful message aside, I'm curious as to, do you guys feel like, because we got this really, like, intricate, like, backstory of Uo-chan, and aside from Toru, we haven't gotten that from any of our other, like, main characters, like Yuki or Kyo, so do you feel that, like, these episodes take away from that, or do you think it only is going to further enhance their story whenever we get to it?
I'm gonna say that I think the reason that this comes first is because, as we expressed our worries earlier in this podcast, I think that this isn't being shown as really plot relevant per se, but it's just, like, for the purpose of filling her out. Whereas I feel like they're saving Kyo and Yuki's backstory stuff for further down the line when it's going to have, like, a huge punch to the story, because then because with them, once we get there past, like, there's going to be a lot of stuff that I think is going to be explained. Like, and because they've been like co-leads with Toru, so like that feels a lot bigger than say like Uo-chan, who's kind of been in the background for a lot of episodes. So I think that this feels more like, okay, she's important, so we do need to give her a backstory episode, but she's not important to the story, so we can do her first and keep our more, quote, valuable backstories for when we get closer to like a finale or to a climax. We can save them so they have a bigger impact.
All right, Michelle, how do you feel about it?
No, yeah, same.
Same. I feel like we all feel the same. Just gotta ask it anyway. So, do you think that we will see the tiny delinquents again?
Only if they all have Uo-chan wigs next time they show up. They need to all wear wigs.
Which one had the Uo-chan wig? I can't remember.
It was the one that like showed up at the end. She was like maniacally laughing, and then it faded into black and white. It was very bizarre.
That might have been the red-haired girl.
I think so.
Also, are you sad that they didn't run into Momiji again?
I don't think they could handle more of the foreigner. I think they'd lose their minds. So it's probably better for them to not see him again.
All right.
I'll say that for the most part, those girls are like kind of inserted as, okay, this is Fruits Basket. We need some comedy in this episode, so we gotta put them in. But I think that they do a good job at the end of making Uotani give the lesson that she learned from her time with Kyoko, of like, hey, like if you're gonna show off, there are better ways to do it. Get out before it's too late. So like at the end, it somehow gets turned into like a positive moment for them. And so when we see them like imitating Uotani and the after credits, it feels kind of like, oh, okay, like maybe there's hope in the world somehow. So I think that they did a good comedy with Fruits Basket has been kind of hit or miss for me in terms of like when they try to do side plots for that purpose. But I think this episode is a good example of how they can do it right, which is like still keeping it tied to the main story, which is something that I don't think they always do.
Yeah, I agree. These past two episodes, I'm like in shock just because of how amazing these last two episodes have been.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it makes me like worrisome for like what's going to happen in the future, just because I'm like, are we going to get the same level of like quality, or are we going to like teeter off of it a little bit, or just something along those lines. But so those are most of my main points that I kind of wanted to talk about. So let's just kind of run through the episode, make sure there isn't anything that we missed. I really enjoyed that Uo-chan used cones at the beginning to get out of there.
Yes.
Like, I really enjoyed that. And then, like, I screamed whenever the tofu hit the ground because that was dinner, obviously. I was like, oh no, tofu. But let's see. We talked about how, like, Toru takes back to the apartment. That everything's labeled in the first aid kit. I like that Uo-chan just makes herself at home and turns on the TV, like, when she's supposed to be, like, tending to her cuts. And then
although, to be fair, like, when you're in a foreign home, or, like, you're in a home of a stranger, that's, like, the safest thing you can do. Like, just turn on the TV. Yeah, like, because that's even, like, better than just, like, sitting on the couch not doing anything, because then you look kind of creepy doing that. But at least, like, if you, like, have the TV on, it's like, okay, well, like, they're not bothering anybody, they're just, like, focused on something else, so it's fine. So I think that she does the right move for someone who finds himself in a house that they don't know or don't feel great in.
That's true. And they also don't have cell phones in the way that we have cell phones. So I guess you can't, like, browse Instagram or Twitter or something while you're awkwardly sitting in another person's home. But I did, so even though, like, that moment was very, like, peaceful and calm, the second time that I watched it, I really enjoyed the Weather Lady's commentary. But my favorite was that she's like, yeah, it's just really warm outside. I even sweated for a little bit. And then she asks, like, why is the temperature rising so high? And I'm like, global warming.
Global warming.
Global warming.
Yeah,
it's canon in the Fruits Basket universe now.
Right.
That weather person was really struggling to stretch her time out on screen.
She was, too, because she's just, like, talking about random things, and I'm like, wow, this is so unprofessional. Like, who hired you? Like,
maybe the person they got to voice act literally like, or just like ad-lib it, like, you gotta be a weather lady, just like sell it for this amount of seconds, and she's like, okay, and that's like what she came up with.
Weather.
Yeah, she's like, okay, I got it, weather, here we go, it's hot outside, guys, get ready.
The heat makes you sweat. Got it. Okay.
There you go, I got it.
Temperature goes up. Okay.
Yeah.
I got this.
But then rain comes and gets you wet.
Oh,
she hadn't got that far.
Yeah,
she's
we
getting
didn't get
there.
That far. she was on the right track. Like,
she's on the right track.
And then, yeah, I'm glad we could all enjoy the weather lady. She's truly a unappreciated member of the cast. Let's see. I like that Toru doesn't just assume that Arisa will stay for dinner, but she still asks her, so that was nice. And we get into, like, all of this super deep stuff. I squeed a lot whenever Toru just, like, rests her head on Uo-chan and, like, just provides that calming moment for her. So, and then, like, we have, like, the whole feeling of, or we talk about feeling lonely. Kyoko comes home. Let's see. So I also really loved Uo-chan just blowing off the tiny girl gang at first. Because they're like, we're gonna battle, and she's like, you guys ready to go? Like,
she's totally ignoring them. That's the ultimate diss.
And then my favorite is, like, they're talking about, like, they're still continuing to talk to the group, but they're like, they're talking about the little girl gang. I was like, okay, like, and, but let's see. Oh, and they're gonna assemble a delinquent army. Alex, what's a delinquent army?
They can't say gang anymore because we're in 2019, so now they must call themselves delinquent armies. That's my theory.
Okay, Michelle, what is a delinquent army?
I mean, for some reason, it just implies that they're very young to me. Like, they're not full gangsters yet. They're just delinquents. So maybe, like, young teen pre-gang army?
Flash mobs.
Oh,
yeah.
Flash mobs. Okay, I like that. Maybe they put chewed gum underneath chairs. Okay. I like this. Delinquent stuff.
Steal old ladies' purses. Does that count as or is that like full-fledged villain? I don't know.
I think that's full-fledged, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
Making fun of someone's haircut when they get out of the salon.
Oh, no.
There you go.
But then, okay, so that also leads me to wonder, like, what does an actual gang do? Because all we did was see them beat each other up, so...
That's only when you try to leave, though. Mostly they're beating other people up, not each other.
For no reason, okay.
Or to rob them.
Yeah. Petty crime.
Yeah.
Petty crime. Let's see. So, I like that. What is it? Uo-chan just, like, flat out asked why Toru always speaks so politely.
No, I loved this because we finally get an explanation in universe, and it's because she got it from her dad. It was a habit of his, and she just got it, and I love that. It's so random.
So, can I ask? Has it been said in the show when Toru's dad died in terms of, like,
she was young,
yeah,
between the ages of 0 and 4, I think. Like, she was pretty young when she doesn't really know him that much.
Right, because, like, to pick up politeness, like, it feels like it needs to be a bit later in her life, but I don't know. Maybe you picked that up quickly.
Kids start talking before the age of 4, so potentially it made an impression.
Or maybe it's like what is it? Whenever people are like, "Oh, you have your mother's eyes."
You
Like,
have your father's
you have your
politeness and your
father's
mother's
politeness.
eyes, Toru.
Maybe it's that.
It's exactly what it is. We cracked it.
We did
Yeah.
it.
And earlier in the episode, also like they have a shot of his shrine as like Uo-chan is coming in. She notices it, so she's like, "Oh, okay, so there was a dad, but he's dead." So it's just interesting to finally get a little bit more on Toru's dad, since that's been such a vague thing throughout this show. I'm kind of interested. I don't think we should use an episode on this, but I kind of want to see like the love story between Toru's dad and Kyoko. Because like, how does Kyoko get like so in love with someone that she decides to leave being this leader of this cool gang? You know, like it had to be strong. So I kind of want to see that, like what made Dad special.
I mean, for the same reason that Toru's special to Ochan. Like, he was probably so normal and so nice, it, like, threw her through a loop. Like, who is this obscenely normal, nice man? And there's something about that I find incredibly attractive. I don't think that's a big surprise. I mean,
maybe,
that's basically what convinced Ochan to want to be Toru's best friend. So, I buy it. I feel like it's probably a similar dynamic.
Yeah, that'd be a good parallel.
I was going to say, I feel like it would probably be extremely similar as well. If not almost like exactly the same, because...
exactly the same.
Well, because we already knew that Kyoko was, like, estranged from her family.
Yeah.
And so that's probably, like, I feel like there's, like, very, like, similar... Well, I mean, obviously, like, Kyoko and Uo-chan have a very similar background, but I feel like it's probably, like, she was estranged from her family. So her family probably, like, was like, okay, like, we just can't deal with you, like, we don't like you, whatever drama it was that led Kyoko to being, like, destructive, a delinquent, in the gang, that kind of thing. And then, like, that also, like, helps drive home, like, this whole thing that, like, how much of an impact, like, one person can have on someone else's life. Like, it's kind of... like crazy to think about too, that like, oh, if it wasn't for like Toru and Kyoko, like Uo-chan wouldn't have like gotten better, or like what if she never like met her, like she never like found Toru, she never met Kyoko, like none of that, like she would still be in a gang. What would happen? Would Toru be friends with Hanajima? How would this play out? I don't like this terrible
alternate universe created.
But I like that, what is it? I like how Uo-chan, finds pleasure in going to school just so she could see Toru. Like, what a nice motivation. Like, I thought that was very sweet. And they're, like, quizzing each other, too, in class. So adorable.
And, like, by the proxy of her going to school, she kind of gets more courage to care about school. She's like, well, it wasn't as hard after a while. And she also had Toru to help. Like, she was helping Toru, but she was also, by proxy, learning more about schoolwork, too. So I think it was a pretty good symbiotic relationship for both of them in that sense.
Yeah, I think so, too. Like, just, again... how much of an impact one person can have on you.
Yeah.
Like, and in the same way, like, maybe not as much, but because, like, Toru had someone to, like, study with and things like that, you know, like, she could continue to do her best in school, make her mom proud, make herself proud, whatever. Let's see. So then we have the girl gang. They're really upset because Uo-chan's going to school. And then I love that, like, Uo-chan has this moment where she's, like sitting outside the classroom while Toru's in home ec or whatever. And she doesn't like that they're spreading rumors about Toru, but it seems like they're there with Toru talking about her. I'm really confused. Was anyone else confused by that, or no?
I think it's like the girls closest to the windows were gossiping about her, but Toru was like on a different team.
Mm-hmm.
So like Toru couldn't overhear them, but O-chan could because she was right under the window that they were talking about everything. So like just like the proximity, I think, is the thing.
Okay. That makes more sense to me.
Do you think Toru would have, like, reacted if she heard people talking about her?
Well, but then it gets even more confusing because, like, Uo-chan hears Toru say that, oh, I'm making whatever it was. I think it was a muffin, for Uo-chan. And I was like, okay, so if she could hear Toru say that, why couldn't Toru hear these girls talking about her? But also, like, Toru's so sweet, she probably wouldn't acknowledge the fact that anyone's talking about her, so...
Well, and Toru was already flustered by someone even saying, like, are you best friends? And she's like, she, like, can't really respond fully, so, like, she also, like, it could just be the Toru thing where, like, she kind of, like, balls up and kind of doesn't really notice what else people are saying afterwards because she's like, yeah.
That's true. That's very Toru-like, so I accept this. Thank you, Alex.
Maybe it was just her tunnel vision of, like, I'm baking right now. That's all she could think about. So all of the conversations just did not even reach her ears.
I'm gonna make muffins. I'm gonna make one for me.
Muffins. No time for any other thoughts right now.
Ooh, I should make one for Uo-chan.
When are we gonna see her make Kyo and Yuki some muffins?
She cooks them stuff every night.
I know.
Well, that's true.
She cooks every day for them.
When are they gonna make her muffins?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. When's Toru gonna make Kyo and Yuki muffins?
Maybe when they pay for them. I mean, at least they got her one swimsuit, 1/4 of a swimsuit.
Oh yeah, that was the first part of this the first part of this two-parter, right?
What a great transition! Like, we're gonna go buy a swimsuit. Here's how terrible my life was until I met Toru. Okay, so we went over everything about Kyoko saving her from the gang. That's interesting, though, that Kyoko still has such an impact in the girl gang, even after she's already left it. I thought that was...
Well, like, Watani, like, in the beginning of this, like, sees her as a legend. So I guess that probably the rest of the girl gang probably has a similar idea of the Crimson Butterfly. It's kind of like this legendary figure. So that must have some weight to it. I also want to say, like, while she's getting beaten up, it's very, very moving when she's like, well, I want to run, but I can't. And then you see her thinking of Toru and them eating muffins together. It's like so sweet and so sad, and it's like,
You're like, why are you, like, jamming all of this adorableness into this terrible moment? Like, well, that's great. I did like that. All right, and okay, we have Kyoko's big theory in life, which I really love. She just wants to be Toru's best friend. Same. I also like that we touch on the fact that, like, we address her feelings whenever Kyoko died too. I thought that was really kind of nice too, and it also, like, brings back to, like, kind of like how we got into this story as well. So it's really nice. And then we come back to real life. Hanajima is using her waves to put down the delinquents. Way to go, girl. Appreciate you. But I also like that Toru's like, Uo-chan, like, could you stop Hanajima? Thought that was a nice moment. And then we have Uo-chan giving those girls the advice. Thought that was really nice. That girl will never be worthy, in my opinion. Sorry, sweet tiny delinquent.
I think she can work hard.
Yeah. Well, and okay, so then the last part, I guess, to kind of bring up is that I really like that this episode is framed with, like, this episode and the last episode and this entire arc is framed with Uo-chan's, like, home situation, because we have that very cold open at the beginning of last episode with, like, her coming home and her dad's just, like, watching the TV, and she goes into her room and everything's really dark. And then at the end of this episode, we have her, like, cooking dinner for her dad. And everything's bright, and he opens up the beer, and she yells at him, just like we saw in the New Year's episode. Do you think this was, does anyone else agree or disagree that this was really good framing of this arc?
I think that is really good framing, and I kind of thought it implied that Uo-chan, like, became a positive force in her dad's life, and is, like, the reason things changed around there. I feel like it's all her. I feel like if she had left it up to him, it would have stayed, like, as dank and nasty and depressing as it was. But I feel like the support she got from Toru and her mom was enough that she could, like, then support her dad a little, since he didn't seem to be capable of supporting her. So, I don't know, I like that. It makes me a little sad because she has to be, like, kind of more of the parent in their relationship, but I'm glad that she, you know, got extra support elsewhere so it's not, like, all on her all the time.
Yeah, I thought that was nice. Alex, do you have any feelings about this framing device?
I think when you explained it, it was pretty good framing. I'll say that I was distracted, that I was like, wait a minute, I've seen this a couple of episodes ago. Are we, like, flashing back to that episode? Is this the same thing happening again in the present? Like, that thought kind of distracted me from appreciating the artistic merits of putting this at the end of this two-parter. So, yeah. So, but I think it's good to see Ua-chan, you know, being a positive force in other people's lives, passing along what she's learned from her hero, Toru's mom.
Aw. All right. So that's the episode. Do you guys have any closing thoughts about this episode, Michelle?
I mean, I just have predictions about what the next episode could be, honestly.
Ooh, I'll take predictions. What are they?
So it's definitely Yuki talking in it. I kind of feel like maybe we could get a confession from him. Maybe he's gonna say something about the hat or about his feelings, and stuff's gonna happen. That's my prediction.
I like this solid prediction. Alex, what do you predict is going to happen next episode? You don't get closing thoughts now.
Oh, wow. Okay. Can I, there's a cow at the end. I forget. Who's the cow?
That's Hassan.
Okay.
He's the one who's got the dark and the light. So,
right.
Yeah,
like I'm trying to think like how he would connect, if at all, because like I mean I haven't really been paying attention, but like when they put the animal at the end, it's like signifying that they're gonna show up in the next episode, right? Like I don't know. So like
I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's fake.
Fake news.
Yeah, I don't know. Hassan shows up to annoy Yuki and Kyo, and Toru calms them down, and Yuki is appreciative, and stuff happens between them, and yay. So that's an episode premise. That could happen.
I like it. We haven't had a new Zodiac member in a while. Do you think we'll get one soon? Maybe.
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 I don't know. It's just odd that we haven't had one in a while. Maybe I like literally was just thinking about it. I was like, wow, we haven't met anybody new. When are we going to meet a new friend? But yeah, so that is this podcast. So again, you can find out more about this at overlyanimated.com. You should also join us on Discord to text chat about animation at overlyanimated.com/Discord. Not only do we talk about Fruits Baskets, we also talk about any other show that we cover, some shows that we don't cover, so you definitely come play with us. And if you like everything that is taking place here, please support us via Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to all our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Steve, aka Frequent Commenter Steve. And as always, thanks to our patron executive producers, Ryan, Steve, Alex, Beatrice, Hugh, Michael, and Needle. So just come back for more Fruits Baskets coverage. We'll be here again next week. What else do we have going on? We cover Miraculous Ladybug if those ever come out. I think OKKO, Alex? Yes?
Yeah.
No?
Final Space.
Final Space. Well, yeah, Final Space. That's weekly coverage as well. There's a lot of shows. Oh, Infinity Train next week. She-Ra.
Yeah, She-Ra.
Get excited. I'm excited. You want strong ladies, go watch She-Ra.
Yes. Crimson Butterfly could totally be a name for a She-Ra character.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's my She-Ra character. I'm taking it. But yeah, so again, come visit us, play with us on Discord, and that is it. So thanks you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye!
Bye.
Love you, Kyoko-san.